Welcome to the Real Estate Pessimist podcast. My name is Erik Stenbakken.
Hey, and I'm Kristi Kandel, and I've been a real estate investor and developer for almost 20 years. I can tell you that journey has not been all sunshine and roses.
I've been in since 2010, and I've got a few stories myself. In fact, this morning I looked it up. I thought, how much has my recent experience cost me? I calculate I could pay full tuition at Harvard for 12 years, as much as I have learned in the last 2 years in real estate investing.
Would it stop you from investing in real estate?
It wouldn't. That's a really good question. And that's actually the subject today is where do we look for inspiration? Where do we go when things in our journey go very wrong? Because they will. If you stay in it long enough, things will go wrong. I remember at the beginning of 2021 or so, the guru explosion happened, right? And everybody jumps in and said, this is amazing. I've never had a bad review in my short-term rentals, and I've never had anybody break anything. And I just thought, the Southern thought, well, bless your heart, because things happen. We're going to talk about mindset today, because that's at the core of how we deal with problems. Now, I don't know about you, Kristi. What did you think when you first heard these terms, mindset and getting your mindset right? What went through your mind?
When I heard it, I thought, okay, that's really woo-woo. Why are we being so hippie? Like, this is business. This is numbers. Let's execute. Let's get it done. And life happens, and you start to realize that no. Mindset and relationships are all that life is about. So welcome, guys, to the Real Estate Pessimist podcast, where we talk about the good, the bad, and the truth about real estate investing. And like Erik said, we are going to talk about mindset because that is one of the most critical factors of being a real estate investor for the long game.
So, Kristi, where would you put mindset in the stack of skills? I don't remember if you remember Napoleon Dynamite. What skills do you have? Hacking skills, Dunchuck skills. In real estate, we think about it's all about underwriting or the skill that you have in a particular asset class. Where do you stack mindset in that?
I put mindset as number one. The whole reason for life and for what we're doing and what we do every day is that there's risk involved and that there is going to be a struggle. So you have to start by having your mindset correct, and people have different ways to make sure they keep that in line. But for me, mindset is number one, because if you have that right, then you're more prepared to face the challenges and the struggles and the obstacles that come up in your daily life. What about you?
100%. When I first heard about mindset, I thought that's just BS. Like, this is something that I'm going to see on Oprah, and it's like, close your eyes and picture money raining from the sky, and then that'll happen. I'm not sure that that's what guests on Oprah actually say, but that's what I had in my mind. And I thought, that's just BS. But the more I learned about technique, hard skills, underwriting, and so on, the more I realized it is mindset. Because it's like Henry Ford said, whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right. I have spent a lot of time, years in fact, reading a lot of books, listening to a lot of podcasts, talking to people about mindset. I believe you're right. It is top skill. It's at the core of all we do. Whatever your asset class is, your mindset and how you look at that is core. Now, we've talked about this before, that things go wrong. Today, we're going to talk about when things go wrong. How do you deal with that? How do we deal with things that we're going through right now? And what about the future? How do we deal with our fears, our problems, things that are in the future? Let's start with the past. How do we deal with things that have gone wrong in the past? Because it's my belief that if we don't process those and deal with them, then we're essentially held hostage by our past. What are some tips, tricks, stories of how you've overcome things that have gone wrong in the past to move forward?
Well, as a recovering perfectionist, I realized in my life that you cannot actually be perfect and get everything 100% right. So I am a huge fan of self-reflection and doing postmortems and see what went well, what went wrong, what can we do better, how can we improve, and really making sure that we're approaching that from just an authentic perspective. Because the more open I realize that I can be as a person for my role in each project, each situation that has happened, then it allows everyone else to open up and become a little more vulnerable and authentic too, because no one is perfect. But if we're able to talk and communicate, then we're able to solve those problems and challenges and then make sure that we're building a stronger team for the next one. And then also giving ourselves the grace and the understanding that things are going to happen. And when you're in the heat of the moment, you sometimes do need to give yourself the grace to go, today sucks. The self reflection and giving yourself grace, because a lot of times our ego wants to play a bigger role and it wants to say, well, I did everything right. It was the manufacturer's fault. It was the supplies couldn't be delivered on time. It was the contractor not managing the subs. And I'm also an extreme ownership person. So everyone played a role. There's always a way that you can get better together. And so those are kind of some of the things that I think about.
I think one of the elements that you mentioned would be easy to miss, and that is ownership. It's that Daniel Pink wrote a good book on the power of regret. One of the things that's essential to use mistakes in the past as fuel moving forward is that you have to take ownership. First of all, you have to admit it. This actually went really bad. And then you have to own your role in it. Now, what did I do wrong? Until I take ownership in that and I'm just blaming someone else, actually, I never get better. See, that's the problem, is I've been through this super expensive education and I haven't learned how to use it. That's a big problem. If we've gone through things in the past, we've got to say, yep, that happened. I own this part of it, because it's also incorrect to take ownership of everything. Chances are there were some other factors involved. And until you're honest about what you did do and what you didn't do, you can't actually move forward in a really healthy way.
I had something happen yesterday that used a experience from my past. I live in Fort Myers Beach, Florida. It was ground zero for Hurricane Ian that brought in 12 to 18 feet, washed. And for the past 2 years, we've been recovering from that. And it's been a very difficult and long process. Well, we just got hit with two more hurricanes. We got pretty significant damage, but I had friends up in the Tampa St. Pete area that are now dealing with what I dealt with from Ian from 2 years ago. And they have all the same feelings and emotions, and they've got the same sense of hopelessness. And I was talking to my friend yesterday, and she's like, I did everything they told me. I've done everything right. Worked 2 jobs to get ahead, to be able to create this future. I followed all the rules. I got all the degrees. I did all the stuff. And what did I do wrong? It's that hopelessness when you're not quite sure what steps to take forward. So I was able to share my experiences from 2 years prior, how we recovered, because what I know this time around is I know the steps and I know the process. And it's great to know that. It also sucks to know that, to be honest, to know what is still ahead. But when I finished talking to her, she said, oh my gosh, this has been so helpful. I said, that actually helped me out, because knowing that my past experience that was horrific was able to help you recover faster. And it doesn't matter if it's a disaster or if it's a project that just went crazily south, or an Airbnb guest that just destroyed your home and made you question everything, because it's all of these experiences that give us the wisdom to know how to go forward and how to do it better the next time. It's not that you lost all that money or time. It's that you gained all of this wisdom. And if you keep in it and you stay consistent, that's then what allows you to apply that wisdom and be better each time.
I think it was Charlie Munger. It could have been somebody else on Warren Buffett's team, had made a mistake in the hundreds of millions, right? They had lost hundreds of millions of dollars. And somebody asked Buffett, are you going to fire him? He said, why would I fire him? He just got the most expensive education ever. Of course I'm going to keep him, because now he's got that experience. So sometimes we need to take that reframing and say, okay, this is experience. The old saying, you either win or you learn. I think you can do both, but often the learning happens when we're struggling. I think you make a good point, I believe it's our responsibility to be honest about where we've been and what's happened, because that helps others. Because when we keep up the social media, everything is just great all the time, we're doing a disservice to basically everyone, including ourselves, because then people think, like your friend, look, I did all the right things. How come things went wrong? Because sometimes it just does. Even though you do the right things, sometimes the wrong outcome happens. Annie Duke in her book, Thinking in Bets, calls that resulting. Is it, well, the result was bad, therefore all the things leading up to it were wrong. Like, well, no, not always. We live in a broken world, and so you could do all the right things and get the wrong outcome. And that doesn't mean you did it wrong, but we got to take ownership when we do. Right. So this is a tricky thing. One of my favorite quotes relating to this is from James Clear. And he said, successes are revised mistakes. If we're not honest about that, then we quit. At the first mistake, we're like, that's it, I quit. It's like, well, no, wait a minute. Success is on the other side of mistakes. If you don't keep going, if you don't push through this, if you don't deal with it, then you can't have the success. Sometimes you get lucky and you get successful right away. I don't know if you've ever played golf, Kristi, but years ago, I picked up a club and hit a few amazing shots. I'm like, man, that's incredible. The person I was playing with is like, yeah, just wait. And then the next game was not so amazing. And then I spend all my, like, I was so good at first. And we can get stuck into that psychologically. It's like, wow, I was so much better at the beginning. Flip side is, this is a mistake sometimes we make, is we judge the decisions that we made 5 years ago, 10 years ago, by the person who we are now. And it is not fair to judge the you of 5 years ago based on the you that you are today, right? Maybe you did the best you could with what you had and things happened. You have to let that go and realize you're not that same person and it's time to move on.
Exactly. So many times in life, we criticize people for changing their opinion, but what we really should do is we should constantly learn and constantly change our opinions and our outlooks on life, because we're broadening our experiences. And by doing that, we now have more to think about and figure out. And we go, of course, oh yeah, now I have a new perspective. So don't beat up your old self based on who your current self is, and be willing to change. Be willing to say, all right, I have a new outlook.
In fact, I believe so strongly in that. That's one of my 21 I am statements I write every day. I am growing and changing. I'm starting out with giving myself permission to change. It's like, well, yeah, I used to believe that. I used to think that, and now I don't. And the faster you do that, this is in business too, the faster you can say, yeah, I used to do that. I don't believe that anymore. Or that doesn't work. And you move on, the faster you get to success.
100%.
Right. So that's some past. What about if we're going through something like right now? We're in the thick of it and things are rough. I believe you could speak to that, Kristi.
Well, yes, yeah. I like I said, I'm in the middle of dealing with two more hurricanes and cleanup and figuring out what my next moves are. And the thing that I've really had to practice now, and what I've had to practice each time I've had different challenges. 2019, I accidentally bought 4 properties in Ohio. Contractors ghosted, had a huge crazy whirlwind. So like whether it's properties or life or both, I've really learned to put things in perspective. And that starts with us pausing and giving ourselves this space to understand that even though our brain is a crazy mess of everything that's going on, that's not who we actually are. That's just us right now in the situation. So if we take the time to pause, it creates the space for us to be able to prepare ourselves to respond instead of react. And then to just give ourselves the grace to go, I don't have to have all the answers. I don't need to conquer it all in one day. I just need to take one step forward every day that's going to move the needle, that's going to eventually get me to the finish line. Because some days are going to feel heavier than others. And some days are going to feel so hopeless and helpless, you just want to give up. You get too many no's from a lender, your contractors don't show up, whatever it is, and it's going to feel really heavy. But good, bad, right, or wrong, this too shall pass. And it always does. It's just remembering that and then simplifying things. Too many times we overcomplicate things. Just start to simplify and take out the things that don't need to happen right then. There's a couple other things I'll do. I make sure I practice gratitude, because even on the heaviest days, I can find at least one thing. And I challenge myself every morning to find 3 things from the prior day. Like even this morning, I was walking my dog and we passed some neighbors that we've started to become closer friends with, and our dogs are talking, and we just had a really good conversation for 30 minutes at the beach, and it just felt good because this morning was a heavy morning. So yeah, it's stuff like that that really just helps. And I was talking to someone yesterday and they're like, yeah, I like to tell myself if something is so time consuming or so consuming right now, will I care about this in 2 weeks, a month,
There you go.
a year? And then that really
Right.
helps. It's all about how do you put it back in perspective to take what's so overwhelming right now and go, it's going to be okay. You're a
That's
fighter, you're a survivor, you'll be okay.
Yeah, there's a lot in there that you laid down. And then they're all important things. Being grateful and realizing where we've come from. The Gap and the Gain speaks to that. Fabulous book, kind of about gratitude and about remembering and stopping and go, wait a minute, where was I a year ago? Where was I 5 years ago? And realizing, okay, if we've been making wise choices most of the time, but not always, we're in a better place. And even if we're in a really difficult place right now, or maybe even a worse place, is looking for the gratitude that we can in the moment. You know, personally, one of the things that has helped me as I'm really going through things is I think of myself as a steward. Okay, I'm a Christian, and I believe that the things that I have, the talents that I have, there's a parable about that. And we're given talents that we can handle. Now, we're not given more talents than we can deal with, but we're given talents and we're expected to do something with this. But here's the part that I'm getting to is that those weren't ours. And here's where that comes into play for me is if I've got, let's suppose I'm a short-term rental owner operator, which I am, okay? And somebody does something very stupid in the property, which they will. Example, somebody right before Thanksgiving, we had guests coming in at peak season, and the guests right before them, they burned up our barbecue, literally just like roasted the whole barbecue. And somehow they opened the door to the oven and broken the glass out of the oven door. And then they tell me, oh no, it was like that when we got there. We didn't do it. Because of course the cleaners wouldn't notice that, right? It was like the other guest who broke the back off of the toilet, literally broke the toilet tank in half and then said, it was like that when we got here, as if the cleaners wouldn't notice that, right? So people are doing dumb things. And if I believe they're doing that to me, I take that very personally, right? People are doing this to me. The universe is doing this to me. And I feel very, very just wronged by it. But now picture this. Somebody mugs me. I'm carrying a stereo in my hands back in the day when that was a thing, right? And so I'm carrying, and somebody steals it from me. I feel like I've been robbed. But if I was working for an employer and my job was to move stereos from point A to point B, and somebody came and stole the stereo, yes, I feel bad. And yes, I feel like, that was wrong. But it wasn't my stereo, right? They didn't steal it from me. It's like the manager at Walmart. I have to picture this. And this is a real thing, especially in short term rentals, is that things go wrong, things go missing. And I think of myself as like, okay, does the Walmart manager stay up at night because someone stole a piece of something from the electronics department? No, they get in a meeting and they talk about loss prevention and they talk about security and they deal with it, but they don't feel like someone has stolen that from them. And for me to have that degree of separation, like, hey, I'm a steward, gives me so much peace. It's like, hey, I'm doing the best I can with what I have. And ultimately, guess what? I don't get to keep this. It doesn't matter. If I successfully preserve all this stuff, at the end, I'm dead anyways, right? So really, really, am I getting in a bunch about something that one, like you said, in a month will I care? In a year will I care? On my deathbed, will I care? And I have to really give myself perspective about this as I'm going through it right now.
That reminds me of a quote that I have on my desktop ever since Ian. And it
That's
was,
Hurricane Ian for
yeah.
just to remind folks.
And it's remember that once you dreamed of being where you are now. And that is incredible perspective because if I think back to my childhood, I grew up incredibly poor in a small town in Ohio. And owning a house to even live in was like a crazy out there thing. So to be where I'm at now with my businesses and the properties, and yes, that does feel, especially when it's a house hack that you're living in that keeps getting destroyed and you keep paying to rebuild it and it feels like Groundhog Day and it's just like, okay, enough is enough. I can't keep rebuilding things. But it's, money doesn't solve your problems. You just have a different type. And what you really start to realize from that perspective is that it's all about the people and the relationships and the collaborations, and that the stuff itself it doesn't matter. And being able to detach yourself from the stuff and realize that you or it or both will move on. That's a big thing. We just get emotionally attached to things at times, and we have to be careful that we're not getting attached to things, but we're getting attached to people and relationships and the things that actually matter.
Yeah, I'm not Buddhist, but I find that book, Michael Singer's book, the title's going to come back to me here in a second, The Untethered Soul,
Yes.
is is very valuable because we do get so attached to things and we think it's us. We're at the center of everything and we're at the middle of everything, which by the way, if you come from a Christian perspective, that's called sin. It's like, is that me first? I'm at the middle of everything. And so whether you're taking a Buddhist perspective or a Christian perspective, it's not you at the center, right? And being able to let that go, just let it go, whatever system you use to do that is very healthy and gives perspective. And it gives us the emotional clarity to deal with what actually has to happen. Because you mentioned something a couple times, I want to emphasize this, is that it's important to have some of that emotional distance in order to make good decisions. Because when we're in anger, when we're in fear, when we're in reactive mode, we do things that are not the best and wisest. And so perspective is one of those important things.
I've got two exercises that I do that really help, and I'm in the middle of one of them right now. But if you ever take where you're at now and do a 10-year exercise, go backwards 10 years and write down your personal and professional wins for the past 10 years. You're going to blow yourself away. And then do a 10-year projection. And because you just looked back and saw what happened over that 10-year period, you're going to be pretty amazed at what you now are kind of confident will happen over the next 10 years. So that's a very powerful exercise to try.
Yeah, related to that, I think one of the important things that we could do when we're in the heat of things is to step back and say, okay, what would the me of 10 years from now tell me to do right now? And you can think about, would they tell me just like, gosh, that's it, I'm out, I'm selling everything, I quit? Really? Would the you of 10 years from now say to do that? Probably not. And so it's seeking that clarity, that mindset to say, all right, how do I deal with this? Knowing, right, that other people have been through these things. So look to mentors, look to books, podcasts, and so on. Keeping a wary eye on social media, knowing that often people only tell the good stories, right? But listen, they're out there. They are actually out there. People are saying it, but there's part of our brain that doesn't want to hear that. And so we skip right over it and think that everybody else is winning only all the time. That's not true. We need to train our brains to listen for that. So we can look to other people and we can just ask for help. I mean, it seems so obvious, but we can just reach out and say, hey, this is really, I'm really struggling. Can you throw me a line here? Will you listen? Will you go on a walk? Can you tell me what would you do in a situation like this? And almost without exception, I have found people to be very supportive when you approach them with genuineness. And not to say, here, solve all my problems. I'm going to shove it onto your desk now and I'm going to go away. Because guess what? No one's going to do that for you, right? But if you said, hey, look, I've tried this and this and this, and I'm stuck here on this point. What wisdom would you have? And then this is going to be a shocker. Do it. Like, actually do this. I can't tell you how many people have asked me for advice in my previous career in photography, and they won't do it. They'll ask my wife, who is in the medical field, well, what would you do? And then they don't do it. So, yeah, just a little pro tip there. If someone smart gives you smart advice, the smart thing would be to do it.
Yeah, now coming to the mentor side of my career and starting to get into that, I now understand why my mentors poured so much into me because I would soak it up like a sponge and then I would go take action until I got stuck again and I would come back. And that's the exact same way. I have no problem taking, you know, for me, doing something that maybe takes 5 minutes, making a connection, giving them some tools I had could be life changing for someone who is just starting out. And I know when that happened to me, I just felt such a debt of gratitude towards them and like, oh my gosh, I owe you everything because without that, I'd be stuck on zero. Well, to them, they've already experienced it. It took them 2 seconds, 5 minutes to do that. So, one, you don't owe them. They are just giving it back and paying it forward. But two, the more you do that, the more I see people go take action and then come back and ask me. I want to pour in and keep helping and guiding them along the way, because I know my words and the wisdom that I have that I'm sharing isn't wasted, and they're going to do more good. So I'm willing to invest my time into them.
Awesome. Okay, so let's suppose this worked. We've dealt with our past. We're processing through our present stuff, but we're scared to move forward. The future seems so scary. The what ifs. What if this? What if that? What if the other thing? We're not taking action. What we're doing is we're inactive. How do we overcome that? What are some tips that you've got for overcoming fears of the future, especially as it pertains to this real estate investing thing?
So I now embrace anytime I feel and this was not the me of before, but anytime I feel the butterflies in my stomach and I start to go, ooh, then I know now, and that's my trigger, and I'm aware that I go, I'm about to face something new. And something new could be scary, it can be challenging, but it could also be really awesome, because I've taken enough challenges and adventures in life to know that, hey, actually, when I feel this feeling, I'm just going to do a couple things. And then this is where it kind of, again, puts things in perspective. Am I going to be dead, in jail, or seriously injured by this? Or am I going to hurt someone else? And if the answer is no to those, then you need to really dive in and go, why am I afraid? Where is that
Right.
coming from? Because normally that's
Right.
our ego. Normally that's our self-preservation. Normally it's what are other people going to think of me? Who cares? Who
Yeah, and they're not
cares?
thinking of you, really.
No, they're not.
There was a really interesting study that was done related specifically to this. And they had a classroom full of university students, and their test subject, everybody was in the test, is they put somebody in this absolutely ridiculous t-shirt, right? I don't know if it was My Little Pony or what it was. It was something just obviously super tacky, right? And they had this person walk into the classroom and record how they felt and how embarrassed they were, et cetera, et cetera. And then they interviewed people as they exited. And guess what? Nobody cared. By the end of class, nobody noticed or remembered this person with this t-shirt. But the person who wore the t-shirt was sure that everybody else was paying attention to them, but they weren't. And this is a big deal, because a lot of our problems that keep us from moving forward are not actual problems. See, there's the difference between real fear and real danger, and perceived fear and perceived danger. And our perceptions are almost always worse and more scary than real ones. As I recall, in my past, one of the scariest things I ever did was take a picture of it was two girls on a beach. And I was in my 20s, and I was like, man, I really want to take a picture of them. Here's the deal. I'll just come out and tell you. They were sunbathing topless. This was in Australia. And I was just like, dude, my friends are never, ever going to believe that this happens. This is back before internet. Okay. So it's like, they're never going to believe this happened. It's like, I gotta ask them, like, can I take a picture and explain to them, like, look, I'm from America. They don't do this here. And I literally had to go on an hour-long walk to talk myself into this. And I came back and I did. As I was talking to them, my leg was shaking so bad. It was just pounding up and down like a sewing machine. They call it sewing machine leg in rock climbing. And guess what? The fear in me, I've never felt fear like that before or since. Okay. I've jumped off of 200-foot stuff. I've rappelled off of cliffs. I've whitewater rafted and all kinds of stuff like this. I've gone off the world's highest commercially, like that will let you do it, waterfall in the world. I've done all that stuff. This was scarier than any of that to me. Okay. And do you know what the real fear was? Rejection. That's it. That's it. Like, the worst thing that was likely to happen with these two girls is they would say no. That's a 2-letter word. And yet, and by the way, they said yes. And I was like, oh, okay. I took a picture, and I ended up sitting down and just talking to them and realizing, holy moly, that all of that was in my head, right? They were not going to attack me or shoot me or yell. It was no. And I have to tell you, friends, probably the majority of our fears are something as simple as hearing the word no. We don't want to hear the word no. And so it paralyzes us. It just, we're held in terror when actually the seller could say no, Or somebody that we said, hey, would you consider partnering with me on this deal? And they said, well, no. And sometimes, let me remind you that no may mean no, not today. They may be flat out of cash. They may have some other issues, and they might not explain that backstory to you. But we're so afraid of no and thinking of what people will think of us that we deny our future selves. Talk a little bit about future self as we're thinking about moving forward to the future. You mentioned that just a minute ago. How does that help you go into the future, thinking about what your future Kristi would think or say?
Knowing that what I'm facing today is, I don't know, it's just going to be exponentially better. I just embrace the new experiences. I embrace the fear, knowing that I'm going to grow, knowing that every no or every rejection or everything that goes wrong, I'm going to learn from, and it's going to give me even more wisdom to know how to adjust. So, like I remember back to a fourplex that I bought. It was my fourth property of multifamily that I was buying, and the seller had put on the listing as is. I was terrified. I was like, what does that mean? I don't know. Does that mean if we go in contract that I can't negotiate anything? And thankfully for that property, I had a partner who was like, we can sign the purchase agreement to say this, but if we don't want it, he's like, we have these outs and we can walk away. Just because they say as is doesn't mean we can't ask or that we can't walk away.
That's right.
And I was like, oh, really? Like, it's not a zero-sum game. And I think that's the
right.
bigger picture. I mean, it turns out that property is a huge cash cow that is appreciated so well. So I'm so glad that I embraced that fear and trusted in partners who were great advisors as well. But so often we're afraid to take that first step because we're afraid that that puts us on a path that we can never come back from. It's not true. You take one step, two steps in a direction, and there's a reason we call it the pivot. You literally just start going another way, get a new plan and go. It's not a zero-sum game. It's not, I choose this and that's it, and I'm stuck with it forever.
Yes. I think one of the things is we think about the future and we're paralyzed to move forward. We don't want to move forward, or we're scared to, is that we think that the risk is only in taking action. And sometimes, I say too often, people don't look at the risk of not taking action. It's like, where will I be in 10 years, 20 years if I don't take action, right? And that's the story behind why I bought my first short-term rental in the mountains here, is because I imagined great-grandchildren saying, oh yeah, Grandpa could have bought a place here in the Colorado Rocky Mountains, but he didn't do it. And now, cost of burger and a fries is what he could have bought that property for. And I think, man, I do not want to be that guy who did not take action when I could have. Now, there's a difference between not being able to take action and choosing to not to because we're afraid, right? So here's some things that I jotted down that can help us sort these things out. We have to decide if it's a real fear, if it's a real danger, or if it's just perceived danger, right? More people are killed by cows than sharks, right? You don't have Cow Week on Animal Planet because it doesn't sell. But the perceived danger of sharks is so big. Okay, look at what the cost of inaction is. In Daniel Pink's book, he did a worldwide regret survey, and 2/3 of all types of regrets, they categorized regrets into 4 basic categories, but 2/3 of all regrets were regrets of not taking action. That's big.
You talk to anyone who is near death or is getting towards the end of their life, they're going to tell you all the same things, and we're now starting to talk about it, but it's not, could I have worked more hours in the office that we could have? It all comes back to the relationships and the people around us, the risks we did take and the adventures we did have. That's why, so the other exercise I'm doing right now is a 25-year look back, which is pretty intimidating. So I'm trying to do maybe 1 year a day or maybe 2. But when you think about that, especially when you go back that far, what are the things that you remember from each year? And it really helps you understand that the handful of things that you're worried and stressed about this week don't matter, and you're not going to remember it yourself. But then it brings out the importance of the things that we do remember and we put value in. That's so right. We can then focus our time on those going forward too.
Right. So here's another tip. One of my favorite podcasters and authors, John Acuff, he says, paper tames fears. Write it down. Put it on paper. Like if you're afraid to make that offer, like, whatever your fear is, write it down. Like, I will make this offer and they will be so insulted. They will send the mafia after me. And you write it down like, no, that's dumb. Like, that's not going to happen. Or it's like, well, word will get out and no one will ever listen to me again when I make an offer. No, that's not going to happen either. And so you have to write these things down on paper, physically, with a pen, crayon, if that's your style, right? Write your fears down and then ask yourself, is that true? And I'm willing to bet you, I'm really willing to bet you that somewhere in the neighborhood of 75% of your fears are not even real. They're not even real. So write them down and say, well, that's dumb. And then just move on. If you don't do that, here's the problem. They stay nebulous in your brain. They're like, well, it could be the boogeyman. It could be the IRS might do this. Like, really? Really? Okay, so write it down. You can spreadsheet and mitigate. Like you could literally list like, well, I'm afraid of this. Well, what could you do to overcome that problem if it happened? Oh, I could do this. And so just enumerate those things, come up with an actual action plan you can do to avoid those things. Otherwise, again, they stay just nebulous in your brain. One of my last things having to do with how to deal with all these things, how to find inspiration, how to get through struggles, relates to how I got into real estate, which is I played the game Cash Flow, which is a Kiyosaki game. It's amazing. I highly recommend you do it. You could do it online if you want to. If you've never played it and you're kind of curious about this real estate investing thing, passive income, do it. Okay. Totally changed my view of how things work. Well, here's what happened is I played the game, played it again, I'm like, oh, I understand now why I need to take action with getting passive income. Right. So I did it. And it's interesting because later, as I played the game again with somebody else, I was super aggressive. The first time I played it, I was kind of like, I don't know how this works. And then the next time, I'm making offers like, hey, I'll buy that card from you for $5,000. Hey, would you get me out of debt? Would you make me a personal loan? Like, well, that's not in the rules. I'm like, I don't care. Well, if you want to do it, I'll pay you money out of my stack for your opportunity. And people are like, okay, you're kind of nuts. But I would do it. And I just absolutely slam dunked the game, just won it. And I got to thinking, like, why was I so aggressive in the game? But in life, I'm so timid. I'm so like, why am I not taking that kind of action in real life? And I thought about it and thought about it. And here's what the conclusion I came to is that at the end of the game, all of that pink money and purple money and yellow money and all the fake money goes back in the box. We put the box on the shelf and the game is over. And so I feel like, hey, no fear, right? I'm going to play the game. The game is over. I win or lose. It's over. And I thought, how is that different than my actual life? Like when I'm done and they put me in the box, is my money any more real than the pink and yellow and purple money of the game? It is not. It is no different whatsoever. And so why am I playing all timid and cautious and fearful with my life right now as if I got to take it all with me? You know, they discovered these tombs in Egypt and they open them up and guess what? All their gold is right there. They didn't take it with them into the afterlife. And I can't either. And so it's like, man, what am I really being afraid of? And why am I playing so small when I get one game and then it all goes back into the box? And so my goal is to act ethically and positively,
I have a
but to play
question for
hard.
you. When you were playing the game and you were playing super conservatively versus when you were playing the game and you were playing aggressively, what was more fun?
Hands down, fun. It's just playing aggressively because they're like, hey, you know what? I could win, or if I don't win, I'm going to have a lot of fun trying.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like in sports when teams are offensively focused and they're aggressive and they're charging for the win, or if they get a defensive mode and they play prevent defense, like the Browns, and then they lose every time. Because if you play not to lose, you are going to lose. If you play to win the game and to have fun and to have the adventure, then you're going to win in life because you can't take it with you. I mean, I've had to do a deep gut check this entire year with different things shifting in the economy and properties and business. Even if I love doing the exercise, even if it were all gone tomorrow, it would not take me the 38 years that it did to get to this spot. It would be way less time because of all the wisdom you have. Worst case scenario, even if you lost it all, it would not take you very long to get it back because you understand the steps, the process, and then it's the collaborations and the taking action that get you there.
The winning is in the playing.
Yes.
It's not amassing the most, because being the richest dead guy in the cemetery, there's no award for that. And so the winning is in the play. And we hope that with this podcast, we can encourage you to move forward and win as you play, regardless of how the score turns out.
It's about the journey. There are no destinations.
When it comes to amassing money, that is just not that is not a destination worth stressing your life out about and becoming a nervous shipwreck. Well, thanks for joining us for another Real Estate Pessimist podcast. And I hope you notice a lot of optimism in this edition. And I hope you notice it in other ones too. We want to tell you the good, bad, and the truth about real estate investing. And the truth is that there is joy in the journey. And we want to encourage you to do that. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys. See you next time.